The scorching summer of 1878 brought more than just unbearable heat to Gunnison, Colorado. It delivered a desperate bargain that would forever alter the lives of the Valenti sisters. Dust swirled across the parched Main Street as Danielle Valenti watched from behind a tattered curtain as three men on horseback approached their struggling homestead, her heart hammering against her ribs with each thundering hoofbeat. "They're here," she whispered, turning to face her younger sister Delilah. At 19 and 17, the sisters were as different as midnight and noon. Danielle with her raven hair and serious eyes, Delilah with golden curls and a smile that charmed everyone she met. Delilah's face paled, making her freckles stand out against her skin. "You can't go through with it, Danny. You can't marry a man you've never met." Danielle squeezed her sister's hand. "Pa made the arrangement before he died. The debt must be paid, and marrying this rancher is the only way to keep a roof over our heads." She didn't mention that their father's gambling debts had left them with nothing but this failing homestead and a mountain of unpaid loans. The sisters' conversation was cut short by a harsh knock on the door. Their mother, Elaine, a woman worn down by hardship and grief, hurried to answer it. Danielle straightened her threadbare dress, the best she owned, and prepared to meet the man who would become her husband. Elaine Valenti's voice carried through the thin walls. "Mr. Evans, welcome. My daughter is ready to fulfill our agreement." Danielle took a deep breath and stepped into the main room of their modest home. Three men stood inside, two rough-looking hired hands, and a tall, broad-shouldered figure who could only be Kyle Evans, the wealthy cattle rancher who had agreed to settle her father's debts in exchange for a wife. The rancher's eyes narrowed as they settled on her, and Danielle felt a chill despite the summer heat. He wasn't an unattractive man, perhaps 30 years old, with a strong jaw and keen hazel eyes, but the coldness in his gaze made her stomach twist. "This isn't the girl I was shown," Kyle Evans said flatly, his voice deep and edged with annoyance. Elaine wrung her hands. "Mr. Evans, I assure you Danielle is my eldest daughter. She's hardworking, educated at the mission school, and the photograph I was given showed a blonde girl," Evans interrupted. "Your husband promised me the golden-haired beauty I saw in that picture." Danielle felt the blood drain from her face. The photograph. Her father had shown Evans a picture of Delilah, not her. The realization of her father's true intent struck her like a physical blow. Before Danielle could speak, Delilah stepped into the room. "I'm the one in the photograph," she said quietly. Evan's attention immediately shifted to the younger sister, his expression changing from irritation to interest. Danielle's protective instincts flared. "No, the agreement was for me. I'm the eldest daughter, and I'll honor my father's arrangement." Her mother's hand clamped around her wrist with surprising strength. "A moment, please," Elaine said with a tight smile directed at their visitors. She pulled Danielle into the kitchen, Delilah following close behind. "Your father promised him Delilah," Elaine whispered urgently. "He showed him her photograph, not yours. She's 17, Danielle hissed. "Barely more than a child. And what choice do we have?" her mother demanded. "We'll lose everything otherwise." Delilah stepped between them. "I'll go if it means saving our home." "No," Danielle's voice was firm. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself. This was my responsibility from the beginning." She looked directly at her mother. "Tell them there's been a misunderstanding. I am the bride, not Delilah." Elaine's expression hardened in a way Danielle had never seen before. "You don't understand what's at stake." Without another word, she returned to the main room, leaving her daughters staring after her. The conversation that followed was brief, conducted in hushed tones between Elaine and Evans. Danielle caught fragments: agreement, mistake, and compensation. When her mother returned to the kitchen, her expression was resolute. "Pack your things, Delilah. You're leaving with Mr. Evans." "Mother, no," Danielle protested. "It's done," Elaine said flatly. "He's agreed to take on the full amount of the debt and provide additional money for us to keep the homestead running, but only if he gets what was promised." Delilah stood frozen, her blue eyes wide with fear. Danielle grabbed her mother's arm. "You can't sell her like cattle." "It's a marriage arrangement, not a sale," Elaine snapped. "One that will save us all." Danielle looked at her sister's frightened face and made a swift decision. "Give us a moment to pack," she told her mother. When Elaine left the kitchen, Danielle pulled Delilah close. "Listen carefully. Take my dress and bonnet. Go to the cellar and wait there. Don't make a sound until I come for you." "What are you planning?" Delilah whispered. "I'm going in your place." "But he'll know as soon as he sees you." Danielle shook her head. "Not if I'm careful. Get my traveling dress and help me with my hair. Quick now." 20 minutes later, Danielle emerged from the bedroom wearing her sister's blue dress, her dark hair hidden beneath a sunbonnet pulled low over her face. She carried a small valise containing what few possessions she could gather quickly. "I'm ready," she said, keeping her face downturned and her voice soft to mimic Delilah's gentler tones. If her mother suspected the switch, she gave no indication. Perhaps, Danielle thought bitterly, Elaine was simply relieved that the transaction would proceed as planned. The money would change hands and the debts would be settled. Kyle Evans barely glanced at her as she was helped onto a horse. "We'll be at my ranch by nightfall," he said to her mother. "The bank will receive payment tomorrow." As they rode away from the only home she'd ever known, Danielle fought back tears. She had never felt so alone, so utterly at the mercy of strangers. But she had made her choice. Better her than Delilah. They traveled for hours through increasingly rugged terrain, leaving the small settlement of Gunnison behind and heading into the foothills. Evans rode ahead with one of his men, while the other stayed behind with Danielle. The man Hank, she'd heard Evans call him, was gruff, but not unkind, occasionally checking that she could manage the horse. It was late afternoon when they were joined by another rider, a tall man with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He rode with an easy confidence that set him apart from Evans' hired hands. "Took you long enough, Kincaid," Evans called out. "Meet my bride-to-be." The newcomer reined his horse alongside Danielle's. Unlike Evans, he took the time to really look at her, his gaze steady and assessing. She kept her head tilted down, hoping the bonnet's shadow would conceal her features. "Miss Valenti," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was deep and pleasant, with a hint of a southern drawl. "I'm Keegan Elliot. I manage the northern section of Evans' ranch." Danielle nodded but didn't speak, afraid her voice would give her away. "She's shy," Evans called back with a short laugh. "Barely said 2 words since we left." Keegan's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "The path ahead gets rough. You might want to ride with me, Miss Valenti. My horse is steadier on the mountain trails." Before Danielle could respond, Evans shook his head. "She stays on her own horse. We're making good time, and I want to reach the ranch before dark." Keegan nodded once, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "As you wish." The trail indeed became more treacherous as they continued, winding upward into rocky terrain. Danielle's horse, unused to her as a rider, grew increasingly skittish. She did her best to control the animal, but her experience with horses was limited. As they rounded a sharp bend, a rattlesnake slithered across the path. Danielle's horse reared in panic, throwing her from the saddle. She landed hard on the rocky ground, pain shooting through her ankle and the bonnet flying from her head. Her dark hair tumbled free, cascading down her shoulders in a cascade that clearly wasn't Delilah's golden curls. There was a moment of stunned silence before Evans dismounted, his expression thunderous. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, striding toward her. "You're not the girl I agreed to marry." Danielle struggled to her feet, wincing at the pain in her ankle. "No, I'm not. I'm Danielle Valenti, the eldest daughter. My sister is 17, too young for marriage." Evan's face darkened with rage. "Your mother sold me a false bill of goods." "My mother sold nothing," Danielle retorted, her fear giving way to anger. "She made an arrangement that I'm honoring in my sister's place." "The arrangement was specific," Evans snapped. "I wanted the girl in the photograph, the one with the golden hair." "Why?" Danielle challenged. "What difference does it make which sister you marry as long as the debts are paid?" Evans stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. "The difference, Miss Valenti, is that I keep my word and expect others to do the same. Your father promised me the younger daughter." "My father was a desperate man who would have promised anything to clear his debts," Danielle said, holding her ground despite the fear twisting in her stomach, "including selling a child barely old enough to know her own mind." A movement caught her eye. Keegan Elliot had dismounted and was approaching them, his expression carefully controlled but his posture alert, ready to intervene. Evans turned to him with a dismissive gesture. "This doesn't concern you, Kincaid." "A young woman is injured on your land," Keegan replied evenly. "That makes it my concern." Something passed between the two men, a current of tension that suggested a deeper conflict than this immediate situation. Evans finally turned back to Danielle. "This changes things. The arrangement was for your sister, not you." "Then return me to Gunnison," Danielle said, lifting her chin, "and find another way to collect your debts." "That's not how this works," Evans said coldly. "Your family has already received payment. You came in your sister's place, so you'll fulfill her obligation." "Kyle," Keegan interrupted, stepping forward. "A word." The two men moved a short distance away, speaking in low, intense voices. Danielle couldn't make out their words, but Evan's agitation was clear from his gestures. Keegan, in contrast, remained calm, his stance steady as he spoke. When they returned, Evan's expression had shifted from anger to calculation. "There's been a change of plans," he announced. "Elliot here has made me an offer for your contract." "My contract?" Danielle repeated, confusion mixing with indignation. "I'm not merchandise to be traded." "Your father's debts are my property now," Evans countered, "and Elliot has offered to take them on along with you." Keegan stepped forward. "That's not precisely how I would put it," he said, his eyes meeting Danielle's. "But I am willing to assume responsibility for your father's obligations in exchange for Evans relinquishing any claim on you or your family." Danielle stared at him, trying to understand his motives. "Why would you do that?" A slight smile touched Keegan's lips. "Let's just say I've been looking for a way to settle accounts with Evans for some time. This seems as good an opportunity as any." Evans' laugh held no humor. "Don't mistake his gallantry for charity, Miss Valenti. Elliot has his reasons." He turned to Keegan. "She's yours. Consider us even." Without another word, Evans mounted his horse and gestured to his men. "We're heading back to the ranch. Elliot can find his own way home." As they rode away, Danielle found herself alone with Keegan Elliot, a man she knew nothing about except that he had, for whatever reason, just taken on her father's substantial debts. "You're hurt," he said, nodding toward her ankle. "May I take a look?" Danielle hesitated, then nodded. As he knelt to examine her injury, she studied his face, the strong lines of his jaw, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the way the fading sunlight caught in his dark brown hair. "It's not broken," he said after a gentle examination. A bad sprain, most likely. You'll need to stay off it for a few days. Mr. Elliot, Danielle began, finding her voice. I appreciate your intervention, but I need to understand what just happened. Have I simply been transferred from one man's possession to another's? Keegan looked up at her, his expression serious. No, Miss Valenti. You haven't been transferred to anyone. The debt is now mine to deal with, but you are free to make your own choices. Including returning home, he nodded. If that's what you wish. Though I should warn you, Evans isn't a man who forgives what he sees as a slight. Your family might face his displeasure if you return. Danielle considered this. Then what do you suggest? I have a small homestead about 3 hours' ride from here, he said, standing. You're welcome to rest there until your ankle heals and you decide what you want to do next. And what will you expect in return? Danielle asked directly. Keegan's expression remained steady. Nothing, Miss Valenti. Despite what Evans implied, I have no designs on you. My quarrel is with him, not you. You took on my father's debts, she pointed out. That's a significant burden for a ranch hand. A smile flickered across his face. I'm not exactly a ranch hand. I manage my own property now, though I did work for Evans years ago. He paused. Let's just say I owed him a reckoning and this settled it cleanly. Before Danielle could ask more questions, he gestured toward his horse. We should get moving if we want to reach my place before dark. Can you ride, or shall I help you? Danielle tested her weight on her injured ankle and winced. I think I'll need some help. Keegan nodded and helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. As they started down the trail, Danielle found herself acutely aware of his presence, the solid strength of his chest against her back, the careful way he held the reins to avoid crowding her. Mr. Elliot, she said after they had ridden in silence for some time, you haven't asked me why I took my sister's place. She felt rather than saw his shrug. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. She's 17, Danielle said simply. I couldn't let her be bartered away like that. Keegan was quiet for a moment. That was brave of you. It wasn't bravery, she replied. It was necessity. I'm her older sister. Protecting her is what I do. They continued in comfortable silence as the sun began to set, painting the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and purple. For the first time since leaving home that morning, Danielle felt a small measure of peace. She still didn't know what the future held, but at least she had bought time for herself and, more importantly, for Delilah. What she couldn't have known then was that this unexpected journey would lead her not just to safety, but to a love greater than she had ever imagined possible. The full moon illuminated the trail as they approached Keegan's homestead several hours later. Danielle had dozed off against his chest, exhausted by the day's events, and awakened only when the horse slowed to a stop. We're here, Keegan said softly. In the moonlight, she could make out a substantial cabin with a covered porch and a barn set back from the main house. Unlike many of the hastily constructed dwellings in the area, this home showed care and craftsmanship in its construction. It's larger than I expected, she said as he helped her down from the horse. I built it with a family in mind, he replied, then seemed to catch himself. That is, I always planned to have enough room for when I eventually settled down. He supported her as they made their way to the cabin, his strong arm around her waist taking the weight off her injured ankle. Inside, the main room was neat and surprisingly comfortable, with a stone fireplace, solid furniture, and shelves lined with books, an unexpected luxury in this remote location. You're a reader, Danielle observed, running her fingers along the leather-bound spines. Keegan nodded as he lit a lamp. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She brought her books west when they came out here, and reading became a habit I never gave up. My mother taught us as well, Danielle said, though we had fewer books. Keegan moved efficiently around the cabin, lighting more lamps and building a fire to ward off the mountain night's chill. "I'll prepare the bedroom for you," he said, gesturing toward a door off the main room. "I'll take the bunkhouse out back." "You don't need to give up your home for me," Danielle protested. "It's no hardship," he assured her. "I often sleep out there when I have ranch hands staying over." After ensuring she was comfortable, he brought her a plate of simple but filling food: bread, cheese, and dried fruit, and a cup of hot tea. "Thank you," she said, realizing how hungry she was, "for all of this." "You should rest," he replied. "We can talk more in the morning." When he left for the bunkhouse, Danielle sat by the fire for a long time, trying to make sense of the day's events. She had awakened that morning expecting to become Kyle Evans' bride, then had schemed to take her sister's place, only to end up in the home of a stranger who had, for reasons still unclear to her, rescued her from that fate. Eventually, exhaustion overcame her confusion, and she made her way to the bedroom. The clean sheets and soft quilt welcomed her, and despite everything, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Morning brought clarity in the form of golden sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing. Danielle found her ankle was still painful but less swollen as she made her way carefully to the main room. Keegan was at the stove, his back to her, as he tended to breakfast. He had clearly been up for some time. His hair was damp from washing, and he wore a clean shirt that stretched across broad shoulders. "Good morning," she said, and he turned with a smile that transformed his serious face. "You're up. How's the ankle?" "Better, thank you." She settled at the table as he brought over coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon. "Mr. Elliot, Keegan," he corrected gently. "If we're going to be sharing space, even temporarily, we might as well use first names." Danielle nodded. "Keegan, then, and I'm Danielle. I think it's time you told me exactly what happened yesterday. Why did Evans agree to transfer my father's debts to you?" Keegan sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Kyle Evans and I have history. I worked for his father when I first came to Colorado, and when the old man died, I stayed on to help Kyle learn the business. We were friends once." "What changed?" A shadow passed over his face. 3 years ago, he became involved with a woman named Sarah. She was new to the area, teaching at the school in Gunnison. Kyle courted her, but when she chose me instead, he didn't take it well." "He lost his friendship with you over a woman?" Danielle asked, sensing there was more to the story. Keegan's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "He lost more than that. He spread rumors about Sarah, cruel lies that ruined her reputation in town. She lost her teaching position. We were planning to marry, but before we could." He paused, the pain evident in his voice. "She took ill with fever. The doctor in town refused to treat her because of the rumors Evans had spread. By the time I could get her to another doctor, it was too late." "I'm so sorry," Danielle said softly. "Evans knew what he'd done," Keegan continued. "He even admitted it to me, said he never meant for her to die, just wanted to teach us both a lesson. I nearly killed him that day." His voice was matter of fact, but Danielle could hear the controlled anger beneath. "Instead, I left his ranch and built my own place. I've been waiting for a chance to make things right ever since. And I provided that chance," Danielle said, understanding dawning. Keegan nodded. "When I saw what he was doing, trapping another young woman in a loveless arrangement, I couldn't stand by. Especially after you showed such courage, taking your sister's place. So you took on my father's debts as a way to even the score with Evans." "Partly," he acknowledged, "but also because it was the right thing to do." Danielle studied him across the table, seeing him in a new light. This was not the act of a man looking to claim a woman as property, as Evans had done. This was something else entirely: justice mixed with compassion. "What happens now?" she asked. That's up to you, Keegan replied. You're welcome to stay here until your ankle heals. After that, if you want to return to your family, I'll take you back to Gunnison. And the debts, consider them settled. Your family won't hear from Evans or me about them again. Danielle shook her head in disbelief. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. A small smile touched his lips. Let's just say I recognize a kindred spirit when I see one. We've both been willing to sacrifice for the people we care about. The days that followed settled into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Keegan tended to his ranch duties during the day while Danielle rested her ankle and helped with what household tasks she could manage. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation that grew increasingly easy and wide-ranging. She learned that he had come west as a young man, following his parents who had sought opportunity in Colorado. Both had died in an epidemic several years earlier, leaving him alone but determined to build the legacy they had dreamed of. He was 32, educated far beyond what one might expect of a rancher, and possessed a quiet strength that Danielle found herself increasingly drawn to. For his part, Keegan discovered that Danielle was not only brave but intelligent and resourceful. She spoke of her plans to establish a small dressmaking business in Gunnison, having learned the skill from her mother. Her dedication to her sister touched him, as did her practical approach to the challenges her family faced. On the fourth day, when Danielle could walk without pain, Keegan took her on a tour of his property. The ranch was modest compared to Evans' sprawling operation but well managed, with healthy cattle grazing on lush pasture and clear streams providing abundant water. You've built something wonderful here, Danielle said as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. All on your own. Not entirely on my own, Keegan replied. I've had good people working with me, but yes, it's satisfying to see what I've accomplished. Do you ever get lonely? The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Keegan was quiet for a moment. Yes, he finally admitted. Especially in winter when the work slows and the nights are long. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared solitude, of lives that had been shaped by loss and responsibility. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Keegan asked, "Have you thought about what you'll do when you return to Gunnison?" Danielle sighed. "I'm not certain my mother will welcome me back. She was determined to see one of us married to Evans. Because of the debts, partly that," Danielle acknowledged, "but also because she fears for our future. With no father and no money, 2 unmarried daughters are a burden she doesn't think she can support." "And what do you want?" Keegan asked, his eyes intent on her face. "I want." Danielle hesitated. "I want what my parents once had before gambling and drink took my father. They truly loved each other. I saw it as a child. I'd rather live alone than settle for less. A brave stance in a world that offers women few choices. Perhaps," she said with a small smile, "or perhaps just a stubborn one." The next morning, Danielle woke to the sound of horses approaching. She dressed quickly and found Keegan already outside, watching as 3 riders approached the cabin. "Stay inside," he told her, his expression tense. Ignoring his instruction, Danielle stepped onto the porch beside him. "Who is it?" "Evans," Keegan replied grimly, "and 2 of his men." Kyle Evans reined his horse to a stop in front of the cabin, his face set in lines of cold anger. "Elliot," he acknowledged. "Miss Valenti, I see you've made yourself at home." "What do you want, Kyle?" Keegan asked, his stance protective as he partially blocked Danielle from view. "To finish our business," Evans replied. "I've reconsidered our arrangement. I'm willing to double what you paid for the Valenti debt." Keegan's expression hardened. "There's nothing to reconsider. The matter is settled." Evans' gaze shifted to Danielle. "I underestimated you, Miss Valenti." Your loyalty to your sister is admirable. It makes me think you might be a worthy wife after all, perhaps even better suited to my needs than a pretty face with no substance." Danielle felt a chill at his words. "I have no interest in becoming your wife, Mr. Evans. Not at any price." A cold smile crossed Evans' face. "I wasn't asking." He turned back to Keegan. "The way I see it, you interfered in a legitimate business arrangement. I'm being generous by offering to buy back what's rightfully mine." "She isn't property," Keegan said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And she isn't for sale." One of Evans' men shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun. Keegan tensed, and Danielle realized with horror that the situation was escalating toward violence. "Stop," she said, stepping forward. "No one needs to get hurt over this." Evans regarded her with calculated interest. "Brave as well as loyal. Yes, I think I made a mistake in dismissing you so quickly." He turned to Keegan. "I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider my offer. After that, we'll settle this another way." As they rode away, Danielle turned to Keegan, her heart racing. "He'll be back, won't he?" Keegan nodded, his expression grim. "Evans doesn't like to lose, and he certainly doesn't like being outmaneuvered." "This is my fault," Danielle said. "I've brought this trouble to your door." "No," Keegan said firmly. "This was always between Evans and me. You just happened to be caught in the middle." "What will we do?" Keegan's gaze followed the departing riders. "We'll be ready for them." Throughout the day, Keegan made preparations, checking his rifles, securing the barn, and sending his ranch hand Miguel to alert the neighboring homesteaders about potential trouble. Danielle worked alongside him, her worry growing with each passing hour. As evening approached, Keegan found her sitting on the porch, staring toward the trail that led back to Gunnison. "You're thinking of leaving," he said, settling beside her. Danielle nodded. "If I returned to Evans, it would end this standoff." "And condemn you to a life with a man who sees you as a possession to be acquired," Keegan countered. "I won't let that happen." "It should be my choice," she said softly. "Yes," he agreed. "And I'll respect whatever decision you make, but before you decide, there's something I need to say." Danielle turned to face him, struck by the intensity in his eyes. "These past days with you have been—" He paused, searching for words. "I never expected to feel this way again after Sarah died. But being with you, talking, working together, even just sitting in comfortable silence, it's awakened something I thought was gone forever." "Keegan," she began, her heart suddenly racing. "I know it's too soon," he continued. "We've known each other less than a week, but I also know what I feel. When Evans and his men rode up today, I realized I would do anything to keep you safe, not out of obligation or because of our arrangement, but because I care for you, Danielle, deeply." The sincerity in his voice touched something in her that had been carefully guarded for years. Since her father's death, since taking on the responsibility of protecting her family, Danielle had pushed aside any thought of her own happiness. Now, faced with Keegan's quiet declaration, she found herself at a loss for words. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently, misinterpreting her silence. "I just wanted you to know where I stand before you make your decision." "I feel it too," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This connection between us, it frightens me how quickly it's happened." Relief and joy transformed his face. "Then stay. Not because of Evans or the danger, but because you want to see where this might lead. And if Evans returns tomorrow, we'll face him together." The decision crystallized in her mind, not a surrender to circumstances, but a choice made from strength. "I'll stay." Keegan's smile was like sunrise after a long night. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle and brief, but it sealed something between them, a promise, a beginning. That night, as Danielle prepared for bed in Keegan's spare room, she found herself touching her lips, remembering the feel of his kiss. For the first time since leaving home, she allowed herself to imagine a future not dictated by duty or necessity, but shaped by her own desires. Morning came with an unexpected development. Miguel returned with news that the sheriff from Gunnison was on his way to Keegan's ranch, accompanied by Danielle's mother and sister. "My family is coming here," Danielle asked, shocked. "Why?" "I don't know," Keegan replied, "but we'll find out soon enough." They arrived mid-morning. Sheriff Thomas Riley, a weathered man with a reputation for fairness, Elaine Valenti, looking older and more careworn than when Danielle had left, and Delilah, whose face lit up at the sight of her sister. "Danny!" Delilah cried, rushing forward to embrace her. "I've been so worried about you." "I'm fine," Danielle assured her, returning the hug before turning to her mother. "Mother, I didn't expect to see you here." Elaine's expression was a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. "Evans came to our home yesterday, demanding to know where you were. When we couldn't tell him, he became threatening." Delilah went to the sheriff. Sheriff Riley stepped forward. "Miss Valenti, I understand you left home voluntarily." "Yes," Danielle confirmed. "There was a misunderstanding about an arrangement my father had made with Mr. Evans before his death. Mr. Elliot helped resolve the situation." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Keegan. "By taking on the Valenti debt yourself, from what I hear," Keegan nodded. "That's right." "And now Evans wants to renegotiate," Riley said shrewdly. "He was at my office first thing this morning, claiming Elliot had interfered in a legitimate contract." "There was no legitimate contract," Danielle said firmly. "My father arranged for me to marry Mr. Evans in exchange for settling his debts. When Evans arrived, he claimed my father had promised him my sister instead, based on a photograph." Delilah stepped forward. "It's true, Sheriff. Father showed Mr. Evans my picture, not Danny's. But I never agreed to marry him." The sheriff rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Evans is claiming breach of contract, but from what you're saying, it sounds more like he's the one who tried to change the terms." "Evans has threatened to return today," Keegan informed him, "with his men." Riley's expression hardened. "Then it's good I'm here. I won't have private disputes settled with guns in my jurisdiction." As they discussed the situation, Danielle noticed her mother watching her and Keegan with a calculating expression. When the sheriff stepped outside with Keegan to discuss security arrangements, Elaine approached her daughter. "You seem comfortable here," she observed. Danielle met her gaze steadily. "I am." "Mr. Elliot is a handsome man," Elaine continued, "and clearly prosperous. Perhaps your father's mistake has turned out to be fortunate after all." "Mother," Danielle said sharply, "I'm not a commodity to be traded from one man to another." "No." Elaine's expression was skeptical. "Yet here you are, living under the roof of a man who purchased your father's debts." "How is that different from what Evans offered?" Delilah interrupted before Danielle could respond. "Leave her alone, Mother. Can't you see she's happy here? Isn't that what should matter?" Elaine's expression softened slightly. "I want security for my daughters. That's all I've ever wanted. And I want the freedom to choose my own path," Danielle replied, "including whom I might love." Before their conversation could continue, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Kyle Evans and 4 men riding toward the cabin. Sheriff Riley stepped onto the porch, his badge clearly visible. "That's far enough, Evans," he called as the riders approached. Evans reined his horse to a stop, surprise registering on his face. "Sheriff, I didn't expect to find you here." "Evidently," Riley replied dryly. "I understand you have a dispute with Elliot over a debt." Evans dismounted, his expression carefully controlled. "A legitimate business matter, Sheriff. Nothing that concerns the law. It concerns me when threats are made, Riley countered. I've heard your version of events, and now I've heard the Valenti family's. Seems to me there's been a misunderstanding at best, and at worst, an attempt to coerce a young woman into marriage under false pretenses. Evan's face darkened. I made an agreement with Howard Valenti before he died. I expect that agreement to be honored. The agreement was for me to marry you, Danielle said, stepping forward. Not my sister. You're the one who tried to change the terms. And regardless, Keegan added, standing beside her, the debt has been settled. I purchased it legally and I've waived any claim to repayment. The matter is closed. Evans looked from Keegan to Danielle, his eyes narrowing. I see how it is. You found a way to turn this to your advantage, haven't you, Elliot? First Sarah, now this one. That's enough, Riley warned. Whatever personal history is between you two men needs to end here. The debt is settled legally, and Miss Valenti is free to make her own choices. Unless you want to face charges of threatening the Valenti family, I suggest you accept that and ride away. For a tense moment, it seemed Evans might challenge the sheriff's authority. Then, with a cold smile, he turned to Danielle. Enjoy your new protector, Miss Valenti. I hope he proves more constant for you than he was for the last woman who trusted him. Keegan moved forward, but Riley put a restraining hand on his arm. Let him go. He's trying to provoke you. With a final glance at the assembled group, Evans mounted his horse. This isn't over, Elliot, he said quietly, before turning his horse and riding away with his men. The tension in the air gradually dissipated as the riders disappeared from view. Sheriff Riley turned to the group with a sigh. He'll cause trouble if he can, but he knows better than to push me too far. Still, I'd be careful in town for a while. After the sheriff departed, promising to check in on them in a few days, Danielle found herself facing her mother and sister across Keegan's kitchen table. The conversation was awkward at first, with Elaine clearly uncomfortable in the situation. What will you do now? Delilah asked Danielle. Will you come home with us? Danielle glanced at Keegan, who had purposely stepped outside to give the family privacy. I'm not sure yet. I need time to think. Elaine's gaze was shrewd. You care for him. It wasn't a question, but Danielle answered anyway. Yes. It's happened quickly, but yes, I do. And does he care for you? Her mother pressed. He does. Elaine was silent for a long moment. I made mistakes, she finally said. After your father died, I was desperate. I thought Evan's offer was our only chance at security. She reached across the table to take Danielle's hand. I'm sorry I was willing to sacrifice you both of you out of fear. The apology, unexpected and sincere, brought tears to Danielle's eyes. I understand why you did it, she said softly. You were trying to protect us in the only way you knew how. Will you forgive me? Danielle squeezed her mother's hand. Yes, if you can forgive me for running away as I did. Later, after her family had departed with a promise from Danielle to visit soon, she found Keegan by the corral, watching the sunset paint the mountains in golden light. They're gone, he asked as she approached. Yes, the sheriff offered to escort them back to Gunnison safely. Keegan nodded, his expression thoughtful. Your mother doesn't approve of your staying here. She's concerned, Danielle acknowledged, but she understands that I need to make my own choices now. And what choice will you make? He asked, turning to face her fully. Now that you're free to go home, now that the danger from Evans has passed at least for the moment, what do you want, Danielle? She took a step closer to him, her heart racing. I want to stay, not because I need protection or because of the debt or any obligation. I want to stay because of you, because of what's growing between us. Relief and joy transformed his features. I want that too, more than I can say. He reached out to take her hands in his. I know it's only been a week, but I feel as though I've been waiting for you my whole life." "I felt something the moment you helped me after I fell," Danielle admitted. "A connection I can't explain." "We can take this slowly," Keegan promised. "Give ourselves time to be certain." Danielle smiled up at him. "That seems wise. Though I find I'm already more certain than I probably should be." His answering smile was radiant as he drew her into his arms. This second kiss was deeper than the first, a promise of the future they might build together. Over the weeks that followed, Danielle divided her time between Keegan's ranch and visits to her family in Gunnison. The arrangement gave her and Keegan space to get to know each other properly, while also allowing her to help her mother and sister establish a small dressmaking business in town. Kyle Evans remained a concern, but his influence in Gunnison had waned after Sheriff Riley made public the full story of his attempt to force Delilah into marriage. The townspeople, especially those with daughters of their own, viewed his actions with disfavor, and many took their business elsewhere. As summer turned to autumn, Danielle's visits to town became shorter and her time at the ranch longer. She found herself thinking of Keegan's home as her own, taking pleasure in simple domestic tasks and learning about ranch operations from Keegan and Miguel. For his part, Keegan watched her blossom with a sense of wonder. The guarded young woman he had first met had gradually relaxed into someone who laughed easily and spoke her mind freely. Their evenings were filled with conversation, shared readings by the fire, and increasingly tender moments of physical affection. On a crisp October evening, as they walked along the creek that bordered Keegan's property, he stopped beneath a golden aspen tree. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice serious. Danielle's heart quickened. "Yes, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I know we agreed to take things slowly to be certain before making any permanent decisions." He took her hands in his. "But I am certain, Danielle. I love you. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." "Keegan," she breathed, joy spreading through her. "I'm asking properly," he said with a smile, dropping to one knee. From his pocket he withdrew a simple gold ring set with a small diamond. "Danielle Valenti, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Yes, I will." The kiss they shared sealed their engagement, and as Keegan slipped the ring onto her finger, Danielle marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a desperate act to protect her sister had led her to a love she had never imagined possible. The wedding took place in November, a small ceremony at the local church with Delilah as maid of honor and Miguel as best man. Elaine Valenti watched with tears in her eyes as her eldest daughter, radiant in a gown she had sewn herself, pledged her life to Keegan Elliot. Sheriff Riley attended, as did many of the neighboring ranchers who had come to respect Keegan for his fairness and hard work. Kyle Evans was noticeably absent, having left for Denver the previous month after selling his ranch to a cattle company from the east. As Keegan and Danielle exchanged vows, she thought of the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. If her father hadn't made that desperate bargain, if Evans hadn't insisted on Delilah instead of her, if she hadn't taken her sister's place, none of this would have happened. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." As Keegan's lips met hers, sealing their union, Danielle knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranch life in the Colorado mountains required resilience and hard work. There were harsh winters, difficult cattle drives, and occasional conflicts with neighboring operations. But through it all, Keegan and Danielle's partnership only strengthened. In their second year of marriage, Delilah married Thomas Harrington, the young doctor who had recently established a practice in Gunnison. Elaine moved in with them, helping care for their home while continuing her dressmaking work. The arrangement brought Danielle peace of mind, knowing her family was secure and happy. In the spring of 1881, 3 years after that fateful day when she had first met Keegan, Danielle gave birth to their first child, a son they named James Howard Elliot, honoring both Keegan's father and Danielle's. The birth was difficult, but with Delilah and Thomas's medical assistance, both mother and child emerged healthy. Keegan, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom during the long labor, was overcome with emotion when Danielle placed their son in his arms. "He's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, just like his mother. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Danielle had proven to have a good head for business, and her suggestions for diversifying their operations, adding sheep to their cattle herds and establishing a small orchard, had increased their financial stability. In the winter of 1883, news reached them that Kyle Evans had died in Denver after a brief illness. The information brought neither joy nor sorrow to Danielle and Keegan, only a sense that a difficult chapter in their lives was finally closed. That same winter, Danielle discovered she was expecting their second child. The pregnancy was easier than her first, and in late summer, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth, honoring both the woman Keegan had loved and lost and Danielle's maternal grandmother. As their family grew, so did their sense of belonging in the community. Keegan served on the town council, helping to guide Gunnison's development as the railroad brought increasing numbers of settlers to the region. Danielle established a small school on their property for the children of their ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders, putting to use the education her mother had given her. On a warm evening in the summer of 1888, exactly 10 years after they had first met, Keegan and Danielle sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. James, now 7, was showing his 4-year-old sister how to lasso a fence post, his serious instructions making both parents smile. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" Danielle asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Keegan's arm tightened around her. "You mean the day a stubborn young woman fell off a horse and changed my life forever?" She laughed softly. "Yes, that day. When Evans realized I wasn't Delilah, when everything could have gone terribly wrong. I remember his face when he saw you clearly for the first time," Keegan said. "I was furious with him, ready to intervene if he threatened you. Then he surprised me." "What do you mean?" "When he saw it was you, not your sister, there was this moment when he really looked at you, saw your courage, your determination, and he smiled." "I don't remember a smile," Danielle said, frowning. "I remember him being angry." "It was brief," Keegan acknowledged. "Just a flash before his pride took over, but I saw it, and I heard what he said under his breath, even better." Danielle turned to face him. "He said that, even better," Keegan nodded. "I think even Evans, for all his faults, recognized something special in you in that moment. Something your father had missed when he made that bargain." "And what about you?" she asked, a teasing light in her eyes. "What did you think when you saw me?" "I thought," he said slowly, his gaze filled with love, "that you were the bravest woman I had ever met. And that if Evans was fool enough to let you go, I wasn't going to make the same mistake. So you decided then and there to rescue me." "No," Keegan replied honestly. "I decided to offer you a choice. Everything that came after that was your doing, Danielle. You chose to stay. You chose us." She leaned forward to kiss him softly. "Best choice I ever made." As twilight deepened into night, they called the children in for supper. The family gathered around the table in the home that Keegan had built with a family in mind, all those years ago, a home now filled with laughter and love. Later, as they prepared for bed, Danielle caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. At 29, she was no longer the frightened young woman who had traded places with her sister to protect her from a loveless marriage. Life and motherhood had softened some of her edges while strengthening others. She liked the woman she had become, confident, loved, and at peace with her place in the world. Keegan came up behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror as he wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "About journeys," she replied. "About how the most difficult beginnings can lead to the most beautiful destinations." He turned her in his arms to face him. "And has your journey been satisfactory, Mrs. Elliot?" "More than satisfactory," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "It's been extraordinary, and it's nowhere near finished." As they held each other in the quiet of their bedroom, with their children sleeping peacefully down the hall, Danielle reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. They had sold her sister instead, but when the cowboy saw the switch, he smiled and said, "Even better," and in doing so had set in motion a love story more profound than any she could have imagined. That love had built a family, a home, and a future filled with promise, not because of obligation or circumstance, but because of choices made from courage and integrity. It was, Danielle thought as she drifted to sleep in her husband's arms, the greatest gift life could offer. The chance to choose one's own path and find, along that winding trail, a love that would last a lifetime.